I'm Betty Hutchins, and I do not do this particular talk for a living. I feel the need to say that out loud. I've agreed to do it. It's business etiquette. I think it's important to cover, and I've done my research. Because that's actually what I do for a living. So when I got asked to pull this topic together, the first thing I thought was, I really have to go out and find some relevant sources. And so I went to the internet. And fortunately for me, there's a lot of people that do work in this space and actually give you the gift of examples, anecdotes, etc., that will liven up a presentation like this. So that's what I did. What I normally do, as I said, is research and strategy, and my company is called Interviews, so I'm an entrepreneur. And one of the things I will say is that my mother did actually do a lot for me in life in trying to cover the etiquette space. But I realized that as soon as you say those words, business etiquette, the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of sort of ironclad rules and sort of stuffy people telling you to hold your fingers a certain way when you drink a cup of tea. And that is not what I plan to talk about today whatsoever. I went to some current sources, and I thought actually this definition was great. So this guy is Peter Post, and if you knew my mom, you'd know that she mentioned Emily Post a lot. So yeah, Emily Post is the doyenne of business etiquette, and really wrote all the books that started the business, which is an enormous business that probably has several foundations attached to it today. And Peter still does work in that space. But really sort of the contemporary definition, which I thought kind of fit really my comfort level, frankly, and I think why it is sort of important to know these things in business, is to really think about business etiquette as a way to, it's not a set of ironclad rules. It's a little more than common sense driven by being considerate, respectful, and honest in your business dealings. And so in my simple world, what that means is that if you sort of have a sense of how to approach things or so what good guidelines are in certain situations, it means that you're going to be more comfortable in that situation, which is going to be better for you, frankly. And it also means that other people will be more comfortable around you. So it's really kind of a give and take kind of thing. And so just knowing some of the tips and tricks can be helpful. No one expects you to ever be 100% great at this, and I can tell you right now that I am not. But it is nice to think about being considerate and making other people comfortable, and so that's really what I'm going to focus on today. And so when I give you tips, I'm trying to be humorous in a way that you'll remember some of them, and also to keep it light, to be honest, because I don't want to be lecturing on this. That's not really the purpose. So hopefully you'll take it for what it is, which is just some good advice, and work with what you can, and learn from others. And you can teach me a few things, I'm sure, too. So here we go. So we're going to talk about dressing. I just sort of picked the 6 biggies based on a conversation with Elaine, because, and it's actually quite difficult sometimes, I think, today, the dressing part for the workplace. So we'll talk a little teeny bit about that. We'll also talk about just attitude in the workplace. I just need to say it out loud once. And then some communications, some things around business events, because we're getting close to the Christmas season. There's business card etiquette, which I'm still not particularly great at, but it does matter to people, and especially if anyone's traveling to Japan. We'll talk about that. And then just some business travel do's and don'ts. All right? So I thought, who better to start with when you talk about dressing than Stacey and Clinton, whom I love and who are no longer on the air in that capacity. But the truth is, and I knew this from kind of really a start, because I worked in advertising for a very long time, that so much of how we communicate to people is actually through our visual presentation. So what you wear, and even just the inflection of your voice and how you say things or how you appear, influences so much of what people think and feel about you. And so when you're starting off your career, it is important to think about those things, or going to particular social situations or business meetings, really thinking about the impression that you want to create. And since I'm old, I always refer to myself as sort of a dinosaur, really, in some ways. But when I started, there wasn't as much sort of conversation about what to wear on the job, etc., because really we had more rules. But now it's actually, it's quite a strategy to think about how the work environment that you're going into, even to go into an interview and to know, how are you going to sort of appear in an environment is kind of tough to do. And so that is, why, you really want to sort of think about, I think the good principle here, and that they talk about on the show actually, or did, is that you dress not for the job that you have, but for the one you want to have. And so that, you never have too much trouble dressing up. It's much worse to walk into a situation and have dressed down. And that's kind of just a good rule of life here. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple of pictures because they're fun. And I'm sorry, we only have one gentleman here today. So normally I try and do it for the opposite, so for the majority, and last year it was the guys. So, but this is kind of a great illustration. I think men actually have a rougher a rougher time of it, actually. I think it's easier for women. We get forgiven more. So in this case, we're looking at business casual or business casualty. And so we would say on the left is this business casual, and on the right is a guy who, even on the red carpet, is a bit of a casualty. So he needed a personal dresser who knew the understanding about stripes and how those might or might not work together. But where it becomes trickier, I think, for men, and I think women will relate to this as well, so it's worth sharing, is these three looks now. So here we have all examples of business casual, right? And frankly, you see all of these on the street and others. And I'll tell you right now that the one I started with, which was better than our red carpet look, is actually a bit of a casualty here. And I don't know if anyone would know why, but I'm going to tell you why. It's because he's actually not wearing clothes that fit him particularly well. So fit for guys is going to be a really good thing to address. You know, it should just fit well. Don't make yourself look like you're wearing loads and loads of drapey clothing because it looks sloppy. You can't keep it tidy. It doesn't matter that the shirt was pressed first thing. Also, gym shirts, like I would say in an agency environment, and this is where I always say business environment matters, but in an ad agency environment, that shirt's no problem at all, nor is a t-shirt would have been fine. But in most environments, you shouldn't really see the shirt underneath. It just makes it a bit too casual. One in the middle, really quite great. Very fitted, looks good, and for women, that's what you want as well. You want just things that fit well, not too tight, not too loose. And then our fellow on the right, yeah, he's a bit dressy, but nobody's going to criticize you for looking that if you walk into a meeting. So that's kind of a great way to go if you want that next job. So really just translating some of the visual cues like that into a couple of, just tips essentially. So you want to think business first, casual second is a nice way to think about it. As I said, dressing up, not dressing down. That's important. You should know the code. So if you're going into a job interview, I would say you find somebody, again, Elaine just gave you some great tips on finding networks. So ask people that you know, who know somebody that works there, what the environment is like. Try and do that with people that are reputable. I have done that. My husband is a terrible example of this, actually. You never ask my husband what people wear for office parties because you will not dress appropriately. All right? He has no clue. So there are people that know, so ask them. And then the other thing is you can actually, you can check it out through literally pictures, I'm sure, in social media of office environments as well. For women and for men, frankly, don't reveal too much. I mean, it is one of the things that is quite difficult now. A lot of clothing is very fitted, but sometimes it's just too fitted. Or if you are, you have to think about your own body type. And some figures wear some fitted things in a more discreet way than others will. And so for women, I mean, you have to watch the chest and other body parts. So you just want to make sure you're covered well. And I have, as I said, worked in advertising, so I have lots of stories about people that don't do that very, very well. And I can tell you it is career limiting because you become the person they always refer to from the office party, so-and-so in the sausage casing dress. You remember when her breast fell out of it? It's awful stuff like that. And it does happen quite seriously. So you really don't want to be the person that has revealed too much. That also means that, it really did happen in my office environment, by the way, but you also don't want to wear see-through anything. Never. Just don't. It might be fine at a club, just don't. Refrain. The other thing to do is to remember the club, sometimes you want to sort of dress because you're going out later. Like Elaine is doing that tonight, but she's going to a cocktail party where a lovely black dress is totally appropriate, and so is it at work. But club wear is never appropriate at work. So because you're going to a club does not mean you should wear it to the office that day, not even with a jacket over it. Usually you can tell. So, just avoid it. It's just good ideas. For guys, depending on how formal your office is, like we used to have to sort of dress up for client meetings sometimes, right? But during the day, a lot of people were in jeans and stuff in an ad agency. So I knew guys that would just stick a jacket on the back of their door, or if you have a cubicle, on the wall. And if it's a nice blue blazer, you can stick it over anything at a moment's notice, and you can dress up the casualist look if suddenly you get called for something. So it's not a bad idea, and women, you can think the same way, just to have that that extra outfit there in case the day changes, because you just really never know what's going to happen in business. And getting groomed, this is about, you have to be careful of stuff like this. Like I can sound a bit like, a grandma when I say that a lot of us work out in the morning. I was always a morning runner, but I never went into the office with my hair wet. You should be dressed for work by the time you get there, and it shouldn't be obvious what you were doing, 3 minutes before. So that kind of thing is just important to remember. And then finally, I think summertime is very tempting. It gets hot in a lot of places, in and out, but you really do need to be consistent with how you dress for work. Summertime is not a more casual time at work. It's just a different kind of attire. So again, think business first, casual second. And the thing that I was forgetting, but Caitlin, who I have worked with for now 5 years and who's now a friend as well as a protege, I guess, she was in the PR space. And when you were at Humber, I thought they had this great sort of approach, which I should have known from my ad days, but we never talked about personal brands back then. But thinking of yourself as a personal brand is not a bad idea. So who are you in life? It's something we should all think about anyway. And so what might that mean in terms of how you choose to dress or to dress yourself, essentially. And I know that sounds crazy, and I'm not meaning to be superficial, because that's not what this is about. I'm just saying, think about it. Like, what is the impression you want to give in life? Who are you about? If you're authentic to yourself, it should be reflected in your wardrobe, and frankly, you should take personal pride in how you look each and every day. That's not a vanity thing. It's just you are a respected person in life. Treat yourself with respect. So the success story here is the Breakers Hotel, and it is a great story, and it's true, which is that they were looking for a pool boy. Oh dear, I'm going to have to move. Okay, they were looking for a pool boy, and needless to say, the guy that got the job did not arrive in the bathing suit and flip-flops. He arrived in a three-piece suit and was hired immediately. So he dressed for the job he wanted, and in fact, has stayed at the Breakers. The thing that I wanted to do on Workplace Matters is simply about attitude. So just have a really great attitude in your work in life generally. This would be, I say, just really, it's such an opportunity for all of us, because a great attitude cannot be taught, skills can. So it doesn't matter where you are, if you don't know something, embrace the opportunity to try it, and just be open to opportunities in your own workplace. Workplace communications are also trickier today than they were when I started at work. I like to use metaphors in my business. Metaphors are great ways to kind of understand how people think and feel about things. They're also really great shorthands. Think about email as a postcard, because that's what it is. When you're in the office, the company actually owns your emails. They are not personal. It doesn't matter that you got a personal email on your office email. It actually belongs to the company. So it can be read by anybody. It can be, that's the way you need to think about them. And so you want to structure them, again, think about how you want to appear to people and how you want to be seen. And so don't, here we have a nice Dear Alex and Magnus. We do want to treat them as more correspondence than, hey, how are you, kind of things, all right? So again, you want to enter it with sort of a degree of professionalism. So I've already said, emails are company property. Think before sending is a really good rule of thumb. Sometimes people get a bit, they'll try and have a conversation that maybe is better handled in person in email, which becomes a bit of a war. That's a good thing to avoid. You don't ever want to be angry in email. They live beyond the anger, so think of it that way. If you're not sure, think about your email voice. I always say communication is a voice. It doesn't matter whether it's speaking or writing. You hear something if you're reading it. And so if you think it's not particularly polite not to say hello to somebody or thank you in person, then you probably want to avoid that kind of behavior in email too, all right? Because it's the same. It's going to feel a little bit rude and abrupt, right? So you want to sort of be careful of that. I've already said to keep it professional. Tone does matter. So sometimes if it is a particularly tricky thing that you're writing about and you just read it out loud to yourself, it's what I always do with my work, even because I do a lot of research storyline stuff. And so I want to know, how does it sound when I say that out loud to somebody? So it's not a bad thing to do in your early days. And I've already talked about anger and never doing it. Cell phones are the other opportunity in the workplace. Very fun. So I decided with cartoons. It's my favorite one is the one up on the right with the guy with the massive mallet who's going to have everybody, before they start, please put your cell phone in the middle of the table, which is the way you feel very often when you're doing this kind of thing, right? Because you can tell when someone's texting or even vibing can shake a whole table. So please turn them off when you go into boardrooms and stuff. It's really polite to do that. And if you actually are expecting an urgent call, people can understand that. You can literally say as you go in, I am expecting an urgent call, so I'm going to keep my phone on vibrate. And then if you do get that urgent call, step outside to take it. Do not do that and sort of halt the whole room to listen to your one-way conversation. And I love this one where the guy's spilling coffee all over the place because it's on a very big tremor setting. All right. So really, the whole idea of not bringing your cell phone into meetings, etc., or and I'm saying one-on-one meetings too, is you really want to be all there for people. That's polite and considerate. Keep them the focus of your attention, not your phone, and that's why learning to vibrate is good. And I've already talked about excuse yourself, and for sure, when you are out in that hallway, please don't yell, because you know what happens. And I'm actually guilty of this because I think I have bad ears now or something. But sometimes you can be a little bit quiet on your phone, and so you start to talk louder, and so especially if they're in Europe, it's going to get really bad. So just avoid the cell phone yell. And texting is actually quite great, but again, nobody's fooled by somebody sitting there very quietly looking at their phone and texting. We know you're doing it, and it feels like you're not listening to us, and it's horrible. So don't do that. iPods were something I never even contemplated having in the workplace, but things have changed since I was there. And in fact, when you're in cubicles, et cetera, or environments that are open space, it is nice to be able to put something in your ear that sort of buffers sound sometime. So that's the way they get used, apparently. We had a big debate last time I said this out loud. But anyway, so the thing to do here, this one's cute. It says, if a tree falls in a forest and everyone is wearing iPods, what will happen? And of course, he's going to get absolutely trounced by the tree. So that's the point. When you've got earbuds in your ear, first of all, you should check in with the people you work with. Like, is it okay in your environment? Because not every environment will actually say it's okay, but a lot will. Then you want to kind of explain yourself. Like if you're somebody that needs to concentrate in doing work, you're writing, whatever, and you find that music helps, fine. Talk about it with your boss. If they agree, great. You want to strategize for interruptions, because what happens if you've got both buds in your ear, of course, is that if I come up to you, I'm now in the position where I have to get your attention, and touching you is not generally a good idea in the office. And, and how else am I going to get your attention? Throwing something at you, maybe not so. And I also don't want you to shriek when I do sort of finally get your attention. So just strategizing for that is really helpful for people so they don't sort of invade your personal space. You want to remove both buds. I can't believe I say these things, but when you're approached, though, because if you have one in, it would again suggest that perhaps you're sort of listening with half an ear or half, and so it's again a bit disrespectful. So try not to do that. And of course, never sing or drum along, which we all love, and forget. Everyone does. Okay, Facebook is this. So I said I would use metaphors. So imagine the front page of a newspaper, and that is really what Facebook is like. And I'm going to tell you now, how many times have I done this now, Elaine, where the recruiters in the room always say, we know how to find you. So, because everyone will look at me, including my own son, and say, Mom, I have such tight privacy settings. And recruiters laugh out loud and show you things that you can't believe people can find. So seriously, Facebook is looked at regularly. You need to figure out a way to remember that it's like the front page of a newspaper. So if you don't want to see it on the front page on a Saturday morning, then don't do it. And so that brings up one thing that I'll just say, and this is a question to the room. We won't have time to kind of debate it today. But one of the things I actually find this personally confusing, because I had to do a Facebook page because I was involved with an old girls thing from my high school, and so I realized suddenly the confliction. You have a Facebook page, and people suddenly want to connect with you that are business people, and that's actually not where I want to connect with people from business, right? So for me, it was easier to say, no, this is not what I do. LinkedIn is that, because then LinkedIn, as Lane said, you can actually divorce people in a nice way from LinkedIn, and it's not considered such bad form because if you haven't connected in a year on LinkedIn, then obviously they aren't part of your network, and people understand that. Facebook is a whole other thing. Like, people get their feelings hurt. So I would say just the thing to think about in your own lives is just how connected you want your life to be personally and professionally. And, just those are the kinds of things you will need to think about, because the moment you let them in is the moment that whatever happened on Friday night that gets published on Saturday morning on your front page is something that they know about, right? So it is worth thinking about as you think about your personal brand again. So going back to that idea. Office parties, this is, of course, the favorite picture. I just said I worked in advertising. I have so many office party stories. And yes, I've occasionally done bad things myself. So I know that when the season happens, that things can sort of go awry. So some things you just want to think about. Sorry, this doesn't quite work. You do want to, so office parties are always tough. I always, especially if you're new. If you're the new person on the block, you do want to mix and mingle, so don't stay in a corner. Go out and meet people. Don't be afraid to do that. Because everybody's nervous, and that's what my mother told me when I got on the school bus for nursery school, and it was true at each stage of my life, okay? That everybody else is nervous too, so just go out and make friends. What you try and do, though, is this is an opportunity when you're in an office party to actually connect personally. So the worst thing you can do is torture somebody with discussions of the document that they need to create for you tomorrow morning when they would just really like to relax and have a nice time tonight, right? So really don't talk shop as much as you can avoid it. Really get to know them as people because it's an opportunity. You do, again, going back to the dressing thing, do you want to dress in good taste? So again, I mean, this is where evening gowns are not a friend. So if it's a formal, and I used to go to these in advertising, that was where things got way out of hand because we had, low cut, backless, you name it. And so that's really, again, it's an office, so it was probably better not to wear those dresses. It's always good to have a little bit of wine or comfort, but don't overindulge. You don't want to be the person who had to be carried out, as my friend did, fireman's lift to the limousine waiting for him outside. Because he'd had way too much to drink. And you also don't want to be the person that, I was talking to a woman who just sort of crumpled to the floor, like in the middle of the conversation, because there'd been one glass of champagne too many. It does happen, so if it does happen to you, don't worry, people will forget. But look, I'm saying that 15 years later, but I didn't use their names, so that's good. And what you always want to do at office parties as well, though, is to thank those people that have helped. Because if you've had a good time, even if you haven't had a good time, somebody went to the trouble of organizing it. And trust me, those things take a lot of work. So it's always really nice to go and recognize those individuals. Okay? Just good manners. Again, remember, considerate, honest, and respectful. That's kind of what this is all about. Oops, and I've gone backwards, I think. Okay. Sorry, this is where I go very goofily to the next slide. Okay. Table manners, I'm not going to get into today in any kind of big way. They are sort of, if you've sort of, been in certain types of business situations, you may get place settings, et cetera, that become quite daunting when you're eating out, especially at formal restaurants and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to say out loud that there are lots of people that know how to do this. There's actually books on this stuff. There's pictures on the web. So, my rule of thumb when you're going to large, fussy events like that is if you're not sure, the best thing to do is to watch the people that know. So just be a little bit slower eating your food, et cetera, and let somebody else pick up that first fork or whatever, because generally speaking, that's kind of a good way to go. And the other thing would be the simple rule of thumb is work from the outside in, because that's generally the way it works best too. But don't worry about it. It's just, just relax and just watch others. The one thing you always have to be mindful of, and it is tough because people will talk to you while you're eating, et cetera, is it's really bad to chew with your mouth open, et cetera. So that's the thing to watch out. I mean, Peter Post says it's the thing that he sees in business all the time today. And I'll tell you right now, I have been out with very senior people that have no table manners. And, I feel actually, I'll say I feel badly for them because it gets discussed. Obviously, it didn't ruin their careers. They're senior people. But in the scheme of life, it's nicer for everybody else around you if they're enjoying their food not to kind of be chewing with your mouth open. Business cards are like a handshake that people keep. That's the way you want to think about them. So they should be handed out respectfully. They should be acknowledged when they're handed out, and they should be thanked, the person who gave them to you. So that's how to use them, and don't then shove them into and crumple them somewhere. They need to go sort of respectfully into something. If you were working with anyone from Japan, there's a whole ceremony around it, which I won't talk about today, but it would be very important to be very careful. And that's the thing about culture. If you're dealing with people from other parts of the world, it's really wonderful. Just go online and look at what their cultural rules are around etiquette, like some of the watch-outs, because that'll just help you make them feel comfortable and sort of prevent situations from arising that are a bit uncomfortable. And I think my last area pretty much is business travel. And so I liked, again, I'm a person who likes humor. So this would be an example of some of the trips I've been on where I might be that person on the left with my briefcase and everybody else is in jeans, shorts, and whatever. And John couldn't help but think that his team had a different perspective on the event than he did. So it's true, right? Like you are traveling for business. So yes, you want to be comfortable on a flight, etc. But there is business involved. So you want to think about, again, how you dress and the signal that you're giving. So the first thing is, frankly, business travel is tough if you've never done it before. So you need to find out what the guidelines are at the office, because there are all kinds of them normally, about expenses, about what you can and cannot do, where you can stay, how much a meal, what's your per diem allowance for meals. So you do want to figure that out really fast. You do want to remember that it's all work. Yes, there will be social activities that happen as a result of traveling. But again, it's with business people, so you need to be mindful of sort of how you behave. My best advice to anybody, even if your office doesn't have precise guidelines, is spend the money as if it were your own. all right, then you won't get into trouble. Unless you're independently wealthy and really have no budget, in which case do not listen to me. Because that is, if you spend the money as if it were your own, you're being respectful and you'll probably follow the guidelines of the company. So it's just being wise about that. And you do always want to think about what people will think. And the weird story I give here is that I mean, I'm a runner. I traveled with a lot of executives because I was part of the executive group, and it was all men. And it was in a day where there weren't a lot of women traveling with those men, right, other than their wives, and I wasn't one of those. So I did have to think things through more. So as an example, I got invited out to go running with a fellow, but he wanted to go at 6 in the morning, which was fine because I was a morning runner. But it created a whole kerfuffle because we had this, people didn't know we were arranging to run. So we were talking about meeting early and going up the mountain to see the sunrise. And I had a guy at my office think that this fellow was hitting on me. And he actually donned his runners and shorts to accompany me. Like he arrived with this group that got together to supervise the activity, and almost died as a result of it. So it was very kindly intended. But I didn't even clue into the fact that he was listening in, worried, et cetera, until he arrived and it was clear that he wasn't a runner and why he was actually there. So you just want to think about things like that. There's all kinds of opportunity for miscommunication. And then when you travel, it's nice to tip. And you're not tipping on the company, you're tipping on your own. But just remember those people that open doors for you, clean rooms, et cetera. They do work really hard. And so part of being a gracious traveler is to actually acknowledge them. Okay? And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Am I on time? Okay, yay. So Jacqueline Whitmore is a great person to look up online. She writes for both men and women. And I just thought it was great to have Peter Post in the mix because he actually writes for the Globe, the Boston Globe, and he has a regular column. So it's very easy with these people to put in questions online if you just have circumstances. And one of the things I've always said for these meetings is that we do this like once a year or whatever. But I would really encourage any of you, if you have situations that you're finding awkward, I learned from them, to be honest. And I know when we did this sort of the first time, we actually used situations out loud to sort of walk through and say, what would you do in this situation? I think it's a better, more relevant way to really talk about this beyond the guidelines, because you'll always find situations where you're really not sure if you handled it okay. And it's great if we all learn from it, and it'll give me good material for the next time I give it. So thank you very much for your time.